Welcome back, everybody, to Seahawk Talk and Ethos Seahawks. I'm Joe Stevens. This is Candace, longtime friend of the show, ever since like the channel started about 8 months, 10 months ago,
Yeah,
whatever. So, yeah, how are you doing? How are you feeling? A lot has changed since we last talked. I think we talked about mid-season, so a
yeah.
lot has changed.
It's a whole different like team, like pretty much, man. It's been up and down to say the least. That's for sure. It's hard to just say one way or the other that it's been all good because we've had some good moments since we last talked, but
Yeah,
some real terrible moments. And so, but overall, I'm excited about the future. And if anybody
I am
follows my
too.
stuff, they
I
know that I've been waiting for this day, not thinking it was gonna happen. But here we are.
Yeah, I've been honestly, you know me, I've been the opposite. I've been kind of dreading this day for when they move on from Pete, but it's a good decision. I just get too emotionally invested. And I think that's what the Seahawks were too with Pete because he's one of those guys that never won a Super Bowl before him, never were that relevant before him. You got to thank him for what he's did, but yeah, I think it is about the time that we move on. As much as it hurts, it still hurts, but
It
you
does.
know,
I'll miss the guy. Like I mean, as somebody who regularly called for his head,
mhm.
um, I genuinely knew even then, like they're going to be so like the next coach isn't going to be Pete Carroll. Like there's no way you're going to be able to duplicate the energy, his press conferences, his like who he is as a guy. And because he went out, I guess still in good standing. I mean, I mean, a lot of people do feel like it was his time, but like it was still a winning season, right? So like
Mhm.
a lot of people struggle with that he sort of had more to give, right? And I think
Yeah.
even he
Well,
feels like he had more to give,
it's not like Belichick either, where Belichick just
right?
turns in two stinkers a season. I mean, the team was fairly competitive. I mean,
Right.
if you look, the problem was finishing. It was the difference between that and really, having a shot at the NFC West was just finishing.
Yeah.
I think the Dallas game should have won that game. Um, the Pittsburgh game just did not. I mean, people can blame Pete and the scheme all you want, but when your guys aren't making tackles, I think there was. I rewatched it, and there was it seemed like a missed tackle on every run play.
Yeah.
Um,
Legit.
so those two games alone, that puts you at 11 wins. But there was a few games where we got blown out this year. Obviously, I think we should have had
The
the second.
Titans game.
Yeah,
Titans game was a tough one.
yeah. I think
They
the
played
second
pretty bad.
Rams game was another one that just
Yeah, losing that one was a getting swept by the Rams, the rebuilding Rams.
yeah.
Not a good look. Not a
Yeah,
good look.
but hey, we are where we are, so let's just move forward. I guess
Yeah,
nothing.
but I'll say this, like I OP a lot for sure. Like the only reason why, for those of you who don't know, like I live in Tennessee. Like the only reason why I am a Seahawks fan is because of Pete and the culture that he brought. Like I didn't watch football at all till like 2010, something like that. When I first started to get in the game, and I didn't want to hop on a bandwagon. Like a lot of people are Cowboys fans in my city in Memphis, and like I didn't want to do that just because people like around me did. So I decided to just watch every team, like watch every game for like a year. And the culture that Pete was beginning to create was everything that I could relate for. I'm a Grizzlies fan, Memphis Grizzlies fan, so grit and grind. Like it was basically grit and grind NFL. Essentially, it's like you got all these dudes with like chips on their shoulders, and they just sort of play with a different swagger, and like I just sort of related to that in a way that I couldn't relate to any other culture. I felt like every other team was a team, and like the Seahawks was like a culture, right? And so that's what really got me on the team, really got me invested in the Seahawks organization. And so I do want to give P his flowers for sure, because he will be missed, and I'm pretty sure I will compare the next coach to him, no question about it. But also, it was time.
Well, yeah, and if we find another guy that has half the success that Pete Carroll has had here, it'll be a successful coaching hire. Realistically, if we have a guy that makes it to a Super Bowl,
Yeah,
um, it's just it's not. It's hard to replicate what Pete did. I mean, the
Mhm.
winning percentage. I don't have it off the top of my head, but
It's like
like
66% or something like that.
yeah, I mean, pretty damn impressive for
Yep.
a couple years rebuilding to like the 2018 team. Everybody thought was going to be not a playoff team, took him to the playoffs, but he's continued to defy expectations. I don't expect to see him on an NFL sideline this year, but if he did, it wouldn't totally shock me, to be completely honest.
I think it'll take a year to process and
But
rethink.
then I think he's too old. I think that's the problem. But then I think, because I feel like he's 72 now, so you can maybe get 2 good seasons out of him. Um,
It's a question of if a team is willing to take a shot on him,
yeah,
and if they are, I think he'd do it. But I think he needs a year to sort of. He was so focused on, like, in his mind he was going to coach again. So I think it would be a little. Pete's energetic, but he's not impulsive. He still plans things. I don't think he would just jump into the next opportunity. I don't think he'd want to, move up with his wife and all of that without putting some real thought into it. So it would have to be the right opportunity for sure. But I agree. I think he wouldn't surprise me to see him coaching again because he does still have some great qualities. Like a team like the Chargers that needs culture as bad as they need culture could do it. Now the ownership is terrible, so I don't know if Pete would agree to that. But
yeah, exactly. It's just I don't think he'll be somewhere else, but it wouldn't be the most crazy thing I've ever seen if I see him on a
yeah,
different sideline.
he's
Um,
got more to give. I think there are situations that he works well in, and I'm not sure that where the Seahawks are going is his cup of tea anymore.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be a lot of guys that need to leave. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
was another big thing is I don't think Pete wants to let go of,
Yes.
like he said in his press conferences, I fought for the coordinators. I think he could have done exactly what he did 2-3 years ago and fired Clint Hurt, fired Shane Waldron, and been like, okay, we're doing new coordinators. But I think is he took a stand, and good for him taking a stand. But I think they just thought, okay, well, we're not going to do this. So,
And the players. I think he mentioned and talked about in his final presser about how he fights for players and he
yeah,
believes in doing the best by players. And I think that is to some extent to his detriment. I think he holds on to players way too long. And I think that would have continued had he been there. But your guy Jamal Adams was for sure going to be on this roster if Pete Carroll stayed. Man,
dude, stop. My
it
guy
was,
Jamal
your
Adams.
guy Jamal Adams was 100%.
Okay, okay. I was waiting to talk about that. Let's talk about the hot button issue. What everybody's been talking about. Are we getting new uniforms? No, I'm kidding. uh, what do you want to see in a coach? Because I'm not gonna specifically say who I really want, because there's lots of decent options out there. I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot. Who knows if he's going to be good or not? But who do you see being a good fit here in Seattle?
I think for sure they got to have great leadership. I don't think you can come in behind Pete Carroll
Yeah,
and not be a strong leader. I think players will sniff that out immediately. And I get the sense from what John Snyder has talked about that he plans on keeping a good core, a good nucleus of the roster together. So you got to win over the same guys. So that matters. With that being said, I don't think that leadership necessarily means you've had to have head coaching experience. So I don't necessarily think that it has to be a retread like a Mike Vrabel or God knows it's not Bill Belichick, but it doesn't have to
yeah,
be one of those guys. I don't think. I think you can have a Ben Johnson or a Mike McDonald. I like a good combination of experience in the NFL and leadership, right? And
yeah,
so Mike McDonald's a guy who hasn't had the opportunity as a head coach, right? But he's got a ton of experience with the Baltimore Ravens organization, another organization that has been stable, consistent, has high standards, not a ton of dysfunction. So he knows what that looks like, and I think he can easily bring it. And I think when you've been an offensive coordinator long enough or a defensive coordinator long enough, you begin to think about what you would want your team to be. And when you had years to mull that over and to fine tune that as you experience different things watching other guys, I think you can come in with a strong philosophy still, even if you haven't been given the chance. Whereas I'm not as high on guys like Bobby Slowick, who has been a one-hit wonder, right? I get a little nervous about the one-hit wonders. Dave
Where was
Canales
is that the Texans?
as a Texans guy who just turned CJ Stroud's career around and well, not career around. I mean, who obviously did very well with
Jump started.
he accented a rookie quarterback like that. It's not easy to have a rookie quarterback come in and play that well. Yes, you have to have the talent, but also you have to put that player in the right position because rookies can get exposed, right? Especially in the latter years in the NFL, latter weeks in the NFL, and that didn't happen for him. So, I mean, they didn't have anything really on that offense, like the running backs, the wide receivers.
Pierce is a disappointment because I thought Pierce was going to be the man. But
that was a huge drop off for him. The wide receivers were decent, but like they weren't known guys, they weren't known commodities. Like I think he put them in the right position to succeed. So, but I just don't trust he's had enough time to fine tune, to have ups and downs, to see different nuances, to be in playoff situations, to know what his philosophy is as a coach. Same reason I'm not high on Dave Canales, who was a QB coach for the Seahawks. I think that's weird.
He went. Weird. Did he go to Chicago or did he go to Philadelphia?
Bucks. Baker Mayfield. He turned Baker Mayfield. So, I mean, it's back-to-back QBs, right? That he's resurrected the careers of Geno Smith and then went to resurrect the career of Baker Mayfield. It's impressive, right? But, like, it's 1 year of offensive coordinator experience. Yep. And you're just the QB coach. So, like, you're going to come in and win over this roster, you know, and they see you in a whole different light. I think it's harder because you're coming from they're used to seeing you kind of as a lower guy on the totem pole, and you're coming in now. You're the big shot guy. It's harder to get buy-in, I think, that way. Not to mention, I just don't think he's had enough time to think about what he wants his team to be, like as a head coach, because he's just getting the hang of the whole OC thing, right?
Yeah, no, and that's another thing why I'd consider like a Mike Vrabel, because he's had failure. I like guys that have had failure before. They've failed somewhere else. You know, Bill Belichick failed with the Browns. And then Pete Carroll failed with the Patriots and the Jets. But one thing about them is they've had breaks in between head coaching jobs. I feel like with Vrabel, he's just going from one head coaching job to another head coaching job. I don't think that's the best scenario either, right? He hasn't had a chance to think about, like, hey, what would I have done differently? Where in the case of, I'm going to be honest, I think Bill Belichick's the best head coach in NFL history. Pete Carroll's the best head coach in Seahawks history. They both failed before. But like I said, they had time to work under people after that and think things over and go do different things before they became the man again.
Right.
I like Mike Vrabel, but I don't think he's the answer. I'll support him if they hire him. The only concern I have about Mike Macdonald, that's the Ravens defensive coordinator, is I get nervous about John Schneider. You know, he doesn't really like Jim Harbaugh. And that's who Mike Macdonald comes from. I like Mike Macdonald the best. I just, you know, hope that doesn't get in between anything.
I don't see how that would. I don't see how that's super relevant. Like, I mean, not like they're gonna be talking Harbaugh in their conversations every day. Like, I think you can easily just sideskip that subject. Besides, Pete was the one with the most beef. I think even more so than John.
Oh, for sure. But they both made fun of Jim Harbaugh at one point all the time. They take their shots at him when they got the opportunity. Kind of hard to right now. But yeah, I think. I don't know, man.
So here's my thing on Vrabel. I had to do some insider research because I wasn't sure. Though I am in Tennessee, I'm not a Titans fan, and most people in Memphis aren't Titans fans. It's really a Nashville thing. But anyway, I was able to sort of salvage my social media to get some input from them on some of the pros and cons because I really didn't know like what happened with the Titans. I pay them no mind. They have no culture. So anyway, some of the cons kind of scared me. I'm not gonna be honest. Like some of the feedback that I got back made me be like, "Is this younger Pete?" So his big issue is, I think the biggest, most common complaint I heard was that he isn't really good at picking staff, and he tends to be too loyal to guys that like perform poorly. So I think a lot of people would blame the offense on him keeping a bad coordinator out of loyalty, which we already done that. Like
Yeah,
been there, done that. That's a hard pill to swallow for me. A lot of people do say he's stubborn. Um, I pretty much assume that. So
yeah,
I worried about the ego thing with him and John a little bit, like how that would go, because apparently the whole Titans thing fell out really over politics. It was really a power thing. Vrabel wanted more power. He wanted them to have his friend who was the GM as a new GM. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to go in a different direction. Ultimately, caused a split. So, does that work if a guy who just left because he didn't have enough power? Does that make sense for him to come in a situation where John is trying to really establish himself as the like guy?
yeah.
Like,
Because he was always second fiddle, and people didn't
yeah,
understand. People didn't understand that, and I always try to tell people that, like, no matter how many dumb decisions that John Schneider, the GM, makes, it all runs through Pete. And they're like, "Oh, John." They said something. Somebody told me this was like 6 months ago. Somebody's like, "Do you see John Schneider moving on from Pete Carroll?" And I was like, "That's not how it works here. That is not how it works. It kind of did, but that is how it worked out. But I mean, that's not how it works here. Pete hired John. That's how it worked. They hired Pete first, and then they let Pete help on picking out the general manager, and he was number one. So
I'm gonna
I
say
think,
this.
pardon?
I mostly agree with you, but I think there was a clear shift right before the Russell Wilson trade. Right? Remember that offseason where Russ was still on the team and there was this big question mark. There was this big meeting.
Yeah,
Everybody kept hyping up where like, was there going to be a change? I feel like Pete walked out of that room with less draft power and less personnel power. Like I think Jody wanted to switch strategies. That's when they started going best player available over need and started really emphasizing that and playing that up.
hmm,
I think that's when there was a clear shift. I also think Pete didn't want to get rid of Russ, right? And just the fact that Russ was gone meant that John had to have more power because Pete ultimately just he said he didn't want it. Same thing with Bobby, I think. Like the moves that were made that off season were way more John than Pete. And I think that was the first time that he really started to like step into his own. But before that, 100% agree with you that it's Pete's show.
yeah. Um, Before we get off this, right before we went on, I was actually going through Twitter and I saw your coaching preferences right now, and one that you mentioned that I think actually doesn't get enough credit is Raheem Morris. He'd be one that I wouldn't actually mind as a head coach.
I hear great things about him as a leader. I do. He struggled there, I think, with the Falcons, but because it was the Falcons, right? I think he was on the team before.
He was the interim head coach there, I believe, if I'm
Yeah,
not
I think
mistaken.
he sort of fell on his face ultimately. But I think he, like you said, he's had enough time to go, like you said, do something else, right? Succeed somewhere else. Think about what went wrong, and I think he may be able to apply that. And I think that the Seahawks are talented, and so with his leadership style, with his approach, he's a guy that's always like smiling. If you want some of the positivity of Pete in a very different package,
Yeah,
then I think that's Raheem Morris. I think I'm impressed with what he did with that Rams roster. I mean, they had Aaron Donald and some dudes.
yeah, nobody really. Akilla Witherspoon was like one of their top players.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
But we playing that, so
no, you know what I mean. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, he did it with nobodies.
right.
So um, yeah, another person. So people keep asking me, just everywhere, who do you think's gonna be the head coach of the Seahawks? I go, I don't know. I can tell you who I'd want to be the head coach of the Seahawks. I truly don't know because I've heard names as far as Ben Johnson. I've heard Dan Quinn. I've heard, uh, people. People bring up Lincoln Riley, and I'm like, I honestly don't know. So, yeah, I have no idea. Yeah,
I
Lincoln
think
Riley.
you're right. I don't have any idea either. I have my preferences. I think Ben Johnson is as good as gone. From everything I hear, he really wants to go to the Commanders. Really unfortunate, but I get it. So I think we pretty much are out on the Ben Johnson sweepstakes. And there's been rumored interest about Mike McDonald, but they haven't put in a request. I don't know if that has anything to do with the timeline of them having to play a playoff game before
Might
you
be.
can like put in a request. I don't know. It's a little weird. We'll see. Hopefully they do interview him too. But it's interesting for sure. Like all of the national people keep doing keep saying retreads. Like they keep saying Mike, Bill. I mean, sorry, not Bill, not Bill. Um, Dan Quinn was who everybody said was going to be the guy before the Cowboys game, and now after the Cowboys game, everybody's saying Mike Vrabel, and it might be true. Sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. But also, so many people are hopping on those bandwagons. Like, when have the Seahawks ever done anything that everyone expected them to do?
Orthodox. Yeah.
Like, seriously. I mean, and I know Pete's gone, so it's a little different, but just
Yeah,
seriously.
but
Historically.
half of the brain is still there. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not it's not like it was just Pete doing all these moves that nobody expected. You know, it was
no,
both of them. So,
exactly. Like,
yeah,
when have the Seahawks ever done anything that everyone said it was this, and then, yeah, they did that? Because everyone said it was going to be Jalen Carter. It was not, right? So like even with John, in my opinion, when he had more power by himself, it's shown he typically doesn't do what everybody projects him to do. And so I just wonder if that's a diversion of some kind. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems so weird that so much of the national media and even the radio host on like 710 Seattle, like everybody's like pushing the big names more than any of the other options. And I don't know if that's just
I'm
the
not a
rating.
I'm not a 710 guy. I'm a 93.3 guy for one. But, so Ian Furness, he does the Seahawks pre and post game on Q13.
Yep.
He does a show on 93.3 every day at 1. And he goes, don't be surprised if they hire a guy you've never heard of. Or you've kind of
Right.
heard of, but don't be surprised if they hire a guy that you don't really know a lot about. And you know what? I'm
Exactly.
going to kind of trust the process. And you know what? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's kind of throwing something different in because Pete Carroll in his first 7 years, I think, won 9 playoff games. In his last 7 years, he's only won 1.
Right.
So it's not like we're coming off back-to-back Super Bowls or anything like that. Let's just,
Right.
you know, regardless of who's going to be the head coach next year, if you're cool with moving on, I think there's going to be a lot of roster changes, and I think there needs to be a lot of roster changes.
I'm gonna do a lot. Define a lot.
A lot, as in like the top 4 out of the 6 guys on the payroll, I think might need to do something.
I don't think it'll be that big.
You don't think
Because
so?
here's the thing. John likes the roster.
I
He
don't like
just built
Quandre.
it. You know what I'm saying? Now,
Yeah.
I do one of the safeties go? Probably. I'd be surprised if they got rid of both. I'd be surprised if they got rid of both. For leadership, for continuity, at least for one more year, I think Quandre stays. I think they draft somebody to succeed him. But I think Quandre stays. But it depends on who they hire with the head coach. I think it's one of those things where it's like not a deal breaker, but like I think if John had his way, he'd prefer to keep Quandre one more year. But obviously Adams has got to go. The contract is just too much of an albatross at this point, and you're paying too much money, and they restructured it to make it more dead money. Like you gotta cut them. You gotta cut them.
Nobody's going to trade for him. So,
No, you gotta cut them. Nobody's trading for him. You absolutely have to cut them. I think they got to do something different at linebacker, backer. I think they would have probably Pete would have wanted to re-sign Jordan Brooks, no question. I think that would have been a mistake. I think you let him walk.
I kind of do too.
Yeah,
I kind
think
of
you
do
let him
too.
walk.
I mean, it's not.
Cost too much.
I'm not setting the world on fire if they do re-sign him, but that's one of those guys that I think you let walk. Another guy they have to do something about. Me and Sargent got into a fight the other day about this. Lockett's on the books for a lot of money next year, and it hurts me to say it. And I don't know if he's necessarily. Maybe they'll restructure it, but
I
if
think
they
that
don't, I don't see him paying him. I think he's on a cap hit of $26 million.
yeah, I think I'm gonna double check that here, fact check while we go.
Yeah,
But yeah, they restructured his contract last year so that his cap hit would be bigger this year. I don't think you get rid of him because I think you could still get more production than you got out of him like even last year. I think
yeah.
last year was a pretty down year for him, and I know some people assume that that's because he's washed. I don't think he's that washed.
No, I don't. I don't think he is. I think he's getting up there in age. I think the only time I got really pissed at him this year was that drop pass against the Cowboys on third down. That's the
Yeah,
only time. But he
that
didn't
burn.
expect the ball that early. It's not like it even hit his hands. That was the only time I was super frustrated with Tyler Lockett this year.
I've had a couple of drops when I'm like, dang, Tyler, where he should have got that and he's not quite himself. I don't know if he was dealing with injury. He's a guy that like plays through injury too. So I feel
Yeah,
like part of it, like he wasn't really healthy this year. You can sort of tell he didn't have the normal like burst off the line and I coming some of that, sure, maybe age, but some of that I think is a little bit injury. Also, I'm not sure. I would like to see another year of JSN to know that he can take that number two with like number two coverage, right? Because we saw JSN blossom as the number two, but he wasn't being defended as the number two. You know what I'm saying? Like he just emerged as a number two because he was having more production than Tyler Lockett was. So I'm not ready to throw the baby out with bathwater, but looks like his cap hit is what's it,
are you on?
24? Yeah,
Are
it's
you on over the
27.
cap?
Yeah, I'm on spot track.
Okay,
You do
over the
cap.
cap says 26.8.
Okay, they say about 27. So
Okay, yeah.
which is but I think you're right. You probably restructure that. Curious to see how John is going to navigate the roster. To this point, they've always eaten up their available cap space by doing these short 1-2 year deals, not being willing to extend 3 or 4 years so that it's over the period of time where you're eating the losses. I don't know if that was the Pete Carroll mindset or if that was the John Snyder mindset. I'm hoping it was Pete because in today's age, like you really can do a lot more with your cap space if you spread that out. That's what they would have to do with Tyler. Um, maybe they cut him. Maybe you're right. Wouldn't surprise me if they did, but I think John wants to see probably a little bit more. And if I'm him, I want to see more of this offense together with a healthier line because they never had that.
Yeah, and maybe a different center.
Yeah. Well,
He
I like
wasn't.
Brown. He's all right.
Yeah, he wasn't. He wasn't terrible.
We were used to terrible.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
He's an
Actually,
upgrade.
Posick was being spotlighted this year as a good player for the Browns.
He's been
And
a good player for a couple years now.
yeah, and I was like, what? Shut up. But
That's because we played him at like left guard and right tackle and left tackle. And then they were like, oh, yeah, in his last year, let's play him at center. And what do you know? He was actually decent. Man, I hated that. I hated the
um,
Come on, Cable. Screw you.
so top five paid on the Seahawks next year. Cap number. We'll just do top six because
Okay.
actually seven because I think you can get rid of a couple of these guys.
Okay.
Gino, 31. Jamal, 27. Tyler Lockett, 26.8. DK 24.5. You're not doing anything about that. Quandre 21.2. Draymond Jones 18.1. But remember when they signed him, it's basically a 1-year contract. So if they wanted to move on from him after year one, it'd be very easy. And then Will Dissly, $10 million.
I think Dis and Jamal are gone for sure. No question. I don't think there's any question about that.
See, I'd like to throw Diggs in. It's so hard
I'm just not sure if you can get rid of two safeties and then be like, I don't know, man. It depends on who the hire is. But I just worry about the continuity. Man, I saw this defense when it didn't have a safety. And I know it's a whole different system, but like nothing functioned. And Yeah, now and that dig is costly, and I don't think you need to restructure them. I think you probably just eat that because I think you want to get rid of them the next year. Um, and maybe they do restructure DK. Who knows? They could if they wanted to, just
Yeah,
for money purposes. But I think they can survive getting rid of two safeties. I don't know that this draft is deep enough in safeties for me to feel confident that you're gonna like, you know what I mean, like get comparable. I don't love it. I think you need somebody who knows what they're doing.
yeah,
Somebody.
yeah.
Um,
It's
and
a
I'd
shame
rather
that.
get Quandre. Plus, I think Quandre could play better next year. Genuinely,
Yeah.
I don't love how he was put in positions.
Hmm. No, I agree. He's kind of a playmaker, right? And he wasn't put in playmaking positions. He's kind of been that center fielder, not quite like Earl. He hasn't been just a single high safety, but that's kind of his bread and butter. It seemed like for a long time. So
Yeah, I think you can get more value out of that contract than what you got the previous year. Um, maybe restructure DK. Definitely think you get rid of this. Definitely think you get rid of Jamal Adams. They are far too overpaid. And I
oh,
think that's the
just
only thing. Will Disley, yeah.
yeah,
Um, I think there are some other things you could do. Maybe I mean, I think the head coach will determine if Draymond Jones stays or not. In my opinion, like
yeah.
I think he's a swing guy, right? Where like if he fits the new defensive coordinator scheme, then he's a great piece to have. I think you can restructure that and feel pretty good about it. I liked what he did. I loved his versatility. His versatility was clutch. When Nuosu went out, sort of playing the edge so that Williams can play on the inside, that worked really well. And I just think that's rare to find. So I also think I don't love how they were put in positions like that. They were in a weird. It's 3-4, but they look like they're
It's
in
like a 4-3.
4-3.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
That was weird. I like to see what you can get out of the guy and like one or the other, like put him in the best position. But again, if it doesn't fit what the direction of the new coach is going, then toss him out. Um, and then there
Um,
are other guys that I think you can just
how about Leonard Williams?
if the defensive coordinator is still going 3-4, I bring him back. I loved him. I really loved him.
Oh, I did too. And it's hard to swallow if you let him walk, giving up that second round pick. But we fucked up with that with Jamal Adams before, where we trade.
That's not the same.
No,
It's
I'm
totally
saying when we trade for a guy and then think, oh, we got to re-sign him, right? But yeah, if they don't think it's a fit, don't. But
I'll say this. I'd rather they do what they did with Jamal than signing a guy to an extension who you haven't even seen play it down for you. Like I hate that. I really hate that. Like don't like sign him and then extend him and you have no idea how he looks on your team, man. See how he looks on your team first before you just give him the money. So I'm not gonna kill him for that. Just that concept I don't agree with. And I think you get more out of guys that way too, if they still got something to earn. But yeah, I'm not crying about the second round pick. You got 2/3. You can offset that if you wanted to, but I do think I liked what he brought. Would have liked to see more of it, and would like to see more of it. And he seems like a plug and play. Like no matter what the scheme is,
I was thinking the same thing: a defensive tackle for a 4-3, defensive end for a 3-4. I was thinking the same thing.
and he gives you he can make Jaron Reed expendable. You can have Jaron Reed as the backup, which is incredible because he killed it last year. So like having him as the backup or somewhere else, not as a nose. I don't know. I just feel like I feel like they had good pieces on that D line, and I really just don't believe in the position they were put in. I feel like all those guys underperformed. I feel like you could have gotten more out of every one of them. And maybe that's what makes me sensitive to keeping the roster together because the talent is there, man. Any other coach on that team, I don't know how that's not a top 15 defense at least. I still don't understand how it's not
Yeah,
a top 15 defense.
you know
With that,
what? I'll tell you the honest truth why it wasn't, and it was tackling. Honest to God, that was a big thing this year. You
no,
watched
it wasn't.
so many games. Yes, it was.
It was
I
only at the end of the year. It was not a thing to start the year. In fact, the tackling was impeccable to start the year. Bobby
Oh
was
yes,
throwing up dudes at the line of scrimmage, and you know what I'm saying? Like that's why I'm not. That's another indication for me on the coaching because it fell off so dramatically. Like those dudes were the run defense was like top 5, right? For like the first 7-8 weeks, it was elite tackling, and then it fell absolutely off a cliff, and
yep,
no one could remember how to tackle anymore.
yeah, it was ridiculous. I
To
mean,
me, that's not players.
yeah,
Either
I
you're
watched.
teaching them something wrong, or you're letting them get away with being lazy.
I think letting him getting away with being lazy was one thing. I mean, how many tackles did Woolen miss? It
Good
was
God.
ridiculous. How many tackles? Honest to God, and I'm not. You know, I hate Jamal. I don't hate Jamal Adams. I don't like Jamal Adams. I watched him 2 games in a row. I think they were in a row. One was the first one was against the Cowboys. He missed a tackle, an open field tackle. He gets up. Another player had the guy wrapped up, and Jamal Adams just whiffed again. And then he did it the very next game, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I've never seen a guy miss 2 tackles in one play before, and he did it in 2 games in a row. I mean, it was
Like
something
Tariq
else.
was just as bad. Like the
Oh
so
yeah, no,
I didn't love the direction the culture was going in because Tariq pissed. He got ran through with the
oh yeah,
Arizona Cardinals. I mean,
yeah,
absolutely ran through. And for you to just be bloating and goating because they missed a field goal on a lucky, like, what should have been an easy chip shot field goal, and you're just barking in like it 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 like makes me cringe on the inside. Like it makes me so angry because you were soft on that field all game long, and then you want to be hard, and like all of a sudden
yeah.
you did
It would be
something.
different if his play is like that. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't. Hopefully, it's just a sophomore slump, and he gets back out of it.
yeah,
Um, but honestly, I trusted Mike Jackson more on the field by the end of the season than I did Tariq Woolen. And I love Tariq Woolen. I got his jersey right behind him on every single
right.
show I did. But it was so
Disappointing,
frustrating
and it
because
wasn't just him. It's like Jamal did that. Even Witherspoon did it sometimes, where it made me mad. Where they're like talking all this trash on first and second down, and then you give
yeah.
up third down.
Well, Jamal was the king of giving up 10 yards for a first down, making a big tackle, and then like doing this. And you're like, what are you celebrating about? You gotta still stay on the field, dude.
Man, that whole thing that bothered me.
I
But
know you're a
anyway,
big Jamal Adams fan, but I
I'm
don't.
not a big Jamal Adams fan. I just think the guy. I think he had a bad break, series of bad breaks. I like him. He's cool. I think he's overpaid, but no question, no question about the value that you're getting out of that contract. But I I think he got a bad break. I think he's been put in bad positions. I think that his injury luck is bar none some of the worst in NFL history. But also, I didn't expect him to play that well this year anyway, because
It's
like
not that bad.
that injury, mm, that injury like is career killing. So it would
Yeah,
surprise me none if he went somewhere else and played better. Because that's the other thing. Julian Love came here and played so much worse. And you're not telling me Julian Love forgot how to play football. I mean, that guy's missed tackle rate was almost 3 times what it was his last year in the Giants. Like, that's why I'm like, I'm not sure if it's just the players here. Like, he had a 3% missed tackle rate with the Giants and like 12 with the Seahawks in one
yeah.
year. It's insane. So I bet Jamal goes somewhere else, and I think he's the same player. I'm not sure he'll ever be the same player trajectory wise with where he was going with the Jets, but I think he plays better. No question about that. I think he's at least good. I don't know if he's great. I think he's good. Um, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But we'll see. I could be wrong. Maybe he's just cooked now. That injury took him out.
Kind of rooting for the guy, to be honest. I don't usually root for players when they leave. I'm going to be honest. I'm one of those guys. I'm not one of the wish them the best luck. And I think you've known that from some of the comments I've made on past. But Jamal, it's like he got such a bad there was so much pressure from the start,
Yep.
and then he had to get paid right after. I mean, he
Yep.
had to. What are we gonna do? Let him walk?
Right.
And it just, it just wasn't a fit.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No.
What are your thoughts on Trey Brown though? Sajin asks. I liked him.
Um, he's got one more year left, right? He's a restricted free agent. Restricted.
No, he's got one more year under contract, I believe, because he was a
Okay.
rookie in 20 or
Um,
20.
he's a guy to still put some competition for. I wouldn't just give him a starting spot. I love him as a backup. Love him as a backup. Because I think he can step in and play for you in a pinch. Not sure he can consistently make plays because of he does have physical limitations and he doesn't know how to offset them in a way that I think a DJ Reed does. Just DJ Reed is such an aggressive dude that he just like, I don't know, maybe it's the chip on his shoulder thing that he's got, that he just sort of like can play beyond his size, I think, and break up some balls that he would not normally do. There's a couple touchdown touches that Trey Brown had on him this year that were of no fault of his own. Great technique. Just if he had an inch longer, like wingspan, then that wouldn't have been a touchdown. And so you look at that and you go, you can't put him down, start him every play. But I think he's extremely valuable as a backup. And so you let him compete with someone else. I love to bring in a fourth corner to compete because you're questionable on Tariq Woolen. And that all four guys battled it out. I mean, see who wins.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. And
Not Mike Jackson.
I still like their
Not Mike
defensive
Jackson.
back.
Someone else.
Oh, you don't like him?
I think this is draft somebody.
Yeah, they will. I think with
Late.
one of the draft picks, they'll draft a cornerback, maybe round 7, pick
Or maybe
260.
maybe a cheap bet. I mean, they do have young talent, so maybe a cheap bet.
Seahawks recap show says, how's it going? I did want to ask you as well before we get out of here. Quarterback situation. What are you thinking? It all kind of depends on the head coach or draft. Go ahead. What do you think?
I think Gino's got a year in him anyway. Does he finish the year? Great question. I think they're gonna keep Gino at least one more year because your prospects aren't dramatically better than him. You don't have anything in free agency that you can guarantee will be better than Geno Smith. You don't have anything in the draft, to be quite frank, that can guarantee that they'll be better. Now, I think they will draft someone. They should.
Who do you like? Who do you like?
I don't care. I don't care.
You don't care. Sajin, tell me because you asked about quarterback, and we're not getting Jaden Daniels.
No, because of where we're drafting, I don't even know if they get a guy in the first round. So,
no, not unless
pick a guy, whoever you think fits the. I didn't really get into college football this year. I was so much more into college football last year because the QB was a thing. I'm not super big on college football myself. I don't have a team. None of the schools I went to had like a team, so like college football is my thing. I thought it was very confusing with all of the division changes and it's a lot going on. Anyway, I don't follow them as much, so I can't really speak to it. I trust their scouting team. Pick someone of good value and then see if they can work. Compete against Gino, but I do think they need a succession plan past year one.
Yeah,
so like they got to do something. But
for sure, and I don't really care who it is either, as long as it's not. I'm not banking on Brock Purdy. Don't draft a guy with the very last pick in the 7th round. Like, that's not the kind of guy I want to see sit behind Gino for a year. But if they can sneak a guy in the first round, say Penix is there at the end of the first round. You want to sneak in there at the end of the first round?
He's no way. No way. I think there's too many quarterback needy teams before us.
You don't think
we're 18, right? We're pick 18.
16, I think.
16.
I
think they. Cause what there are like 3 QBs in this class that are like first round worthy. 4. Yeah. The odds that they makes it down to 16.
I think after the Texas game, or after the Michigan game, I think there's a chance that we could we get Penix at 16.
No, you may be right about that.
But what do you, other than quarterback, say 16? What are you looking for? Obviously, we're 3 months away from the draft. But what do you think is the biggest, I guess, fit other than quarterback in the first round?
Best available. But I love to see them go. Maybe O line.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am terrified of this Abe Lucas situation. I just am, man. He had a second surgery. I'm glad.
Hey, you were posting about him like
Yeah.
you were all hyped about him.
I love him, but I didn't know the dude had like a chronic knee issue. Like,
I didn't
who
either.
knew? Who knew? The guy played like 30 snaps this season. Like, it was really bad. Like, he really couldn't play a complete game at any point because his knee wouldn't allow him after having long stretches of weeks and months to like rest it, which to me says rest isn't helping, and it continues to be an issue, and you can't play. Like, it's just not sustainable. So if he's anything injury wise like he was last year, you need another starting right tackle.
Oh, you got one in Jason Peters. He's only 42.
My God, how much of a downturn did the year last year take? That we really had Jason Peters and he was so much better than any of your other options.
I mean, honest to God, he did not play bad.
No,
He was like the
relative.
Yeah, he was pretty much the star on the offensive line at some points. You're like,
but you know what that means? It means that it confirms what I said going into the year, and that is the Seahawks have the worst offensive line depth of any team in the NFL. And I was proven correct by the fact that Jason Peters, 42 years old, off of his couch, was able to come in and immediately be better than Stone Forsythe.
hey, he was 41 at the time, and he's a young 41. All right, he's not. I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe when he stepped on the field for the first time. I'm going, no way.
He really did really well. Cross is young, but he's on the left side, so you need. It's really right tackle I'm talking about, and he needs to. I wouldn't mind getting him some competition either, because
who?
What of us, Cross?
Oh yeah,
a down year.
Yeah,
he sort of regressed, and it could just be the sophomore slump thing, right? But I wouldn't mind bringing him some competition either. Like, earn it.
Yep. Yeah, we gotta have that, and that's one thing I feel like I'm a little bit nervous about. It seemed like it disappeared with through the latter years of Pete, but it seemed like the competition wasn't actually there. Like he'd always preach it. It seemed like it wasn't really there.
Yeah.
It seemed like with our two previous head coaches, because that's all I watched when I was live with Mike Holmgren and Jim Mora, there was never that. It's basically you knew who the starters were going into the season.
Yeah.
And they never got their jobs taken away from them. I want to see, this is still a young team. Let's have them all compete like Pete Carroll did, and it worked out pretty damn good when you let that happen.
It did, and I think I agree with you. It got a little stagnant. I think the cornerback competition was thriving, and maybe even safety. I think Jarek Reed was his name.
Yeah, Jarek Reed. He got hurt. I was going to bring that up earlier when you were talking about the safeties.
He was pretty good. I liked him, but that wasn't really a competition, like you said, because the contract. So now I'm with you. I'm interested to get your take. Shane Waldron, where do you land?
Well, he's gone.
Well, I know he's gone. I mean, where did you land on his performance?
I think I don't know. It was so bizarre. I don't know. I really don't. I was gonna say I feel like Pete kind of called the shots. I feel like Pete was telling him what to do. I could be totally wrong, but I did like the sets early in the season. I kind of towards the end of the season too. I always liked the sets where there was like two tight ends in the backfield and a running back. Like I really liked mixing it up like that.
I think I think Shane Waldron has has been given the most unnecessary hate of anybody I've seen in a long time. I'll be honest. I don't get why people hate him so much. Relatively speaking, the offense performed pretty average. And considering
Yep.
they had a massacre of the offensive line and just a constant array of guys in and out, considering the QB himself was hurt for multiple weeks at a time, I think that they actually did pretty well. I mean, average considering those circumstances. I think he struggled in situational moments, but then you gotta wonder, did Pete get to call plays in third down? You know what I'm saying? Like, did he get to like get input on those critical situations? Maybe. I could see a world where that's likely.
Did
Because it
he
would
did
be
he
weird.
call the play not to block Micah Parsons on the last play of the Cowboys game?
That was awful. that was awful. Whoever's call that was terrible. I
How
think
about it?
he did a very good job. So
Uh,
we got a question about Waldron. So Waldron did not get fired per se. Both him and Clint Hurt's not going to do the job. Both him and Clint Hurt have been allowed to interview other places. Shane has interviewed in other places. Technically, if John wanted Shane to come back and he didn't get hired elsewhere, he could come back. So it's sort of open ended. More than likely, Shane's going to move on. I think the fact that other coaches and other teams want him means he did pretty well. I think people want to give him a chance to grow. He's still really young, and I think people forget. I think everybody wants the home run hit play caller, right? The guy who just comes in and he's an automatic offensive genius. But I just don't think that happens that often. It's like a rare moon situation. And so I feel like, given that he's so young and inexperienced, and that Pete Carroll probably had too much say to some extent, I think he did very well. I think he's a great play designer. He just needs to work on the play calling, the timing sometimes. And sometimes he made some really great, like I remember seeing plays and I'm like, man, that was really creative. And
mm-hmm.
there's no other offensive coordinator who I said that about. Yeah, there's no other offensive coordinator under the Seahawks that I've really said that about since I've been watching the team.
Oh, for the
So,
Seahawks.
yeah.
I was like, oh, there's
No,
probably a few
for
around
the
the league.
team, where I'm like, hey, that's a really creative call. Like, that stuff didn't happen ever. It was always same old, same old. He somehow managed to make the Seahawks decent at screens. That's a miracle. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a
decent.
miracle.
Not great.
I
Decent.
think they actually tested out statistically well. I saw a chart. I just didn't bookmark it. Apparently, they tested out pretty well relative. Because, I mean, screens are like feast or famine anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So relative to the league, I think they performed pretty well, which is a turnaround for me. So anyway, Waldron gets too much heat, man. I think
Yeah.
I think a lot of the critiques that people have for Waldron literally aren't even applicable for him. Like, people were saying it wasn't enough motion, and you saw my tweet, like, statistically, like, they were like top 7. Like, yeah.
Dude, you guys were a little late, Sage, and we talked about Vrabel.
Yeah.
We talked about Dan Quinn.
No,
Gonna have to rewatch.
Anyone, but we didn't talk about Dan Quinn. Anybody but Quinn. Anyone but Quinn. That's where I am. Anyone but him. I was neutral initially. I didn't love it, but I understood that he bridges a gap. I don't want him now. I don't. The Cowboys performance is too bad.
My problem wasn't that one game. And I'll tell you what, if their defense was awesome all season and it was just that one game, that's one thing. But I'm sorry, Geno Smith isn't Patrick Mahomes. The Seahawks didn't punt against the Cowboys. People seem to forget that. Seahawks didn't punt against the Cowboys. Went for it on fourth a couple times, but we scored 35 points. DK had 3 touchdowns that game. You can't tell me. It seemed like the Cowboys, what they did was they beat up on terrible teams, which we've never been able to do. We can't beat up on terrible teams. We just play it close if they're good or bad. But the Cowboys beat up on terrible teams, and then teams that actually did have good offenses, they exposed him. So
Yep.
I like Dan Quinn. I like him as a person. He's a great guy to listen to his interviews. He's fun. But you guys are right. I don't think Dan Quinn's the answer
At all. That it literally all.
I
You
think
know,
I think one game though is like too much for everybody to just be like, oh man, that's. But if you look at it throughout the season, they got beat up by good teams, and then they just beat
I
up
think
bad
how
teams.
you lose matters. How you lose matters, considering that the biggest thing for this team and the most frustrating aspect of rooting for this team has been the lack of adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
So, if in that one game, given all of the talent that you had, I mean, one of the best rosters in the NFL, you couldn't adjust at any point in the game. I, I'm sorry. Like, that's a big indictment. Playoffs matter to me way more than regular season stuff does. So, there's that, and then there's also the fact that I wasn't super high on him to begin with, so it didn't take much to like push me over the edge.
Yeah, it's kind of it feels like almost having a Pete Carroll 2.0.
Yeah, and that's why
It's like,
I wasn't super high on it to begin with.
well, at that point, why are you getting rid of Pete Carroll if you're
Right,
going to hire Pete Carroll 2.0?
exactly,
We're
the
doing
younger
this
one.
refresh, but is there anything else you want to talk about?
Let's see, coaches, players. What's your Bobby take, Wagner?
That's a rough one. It's for the right price, you bring him back and play him on first and second down.
Thank you. I agree. I completely agree. There is no reason in my mind that Bobby should have been on the field 100% of the snaps. Why? And I think that was a Pete thing for sure. But like, why? Why is he on the field 100% of snaps when you've already shown it proven he could be one of the best linebackers in the league if you just play him situationally?
Yeah, and I think he's a great leader. I think honestly, what was he making last year? $5.5 million.
It was like 5 million.
If you get him back at $5 million, that's fine, but you got to use him appropriately. I think $5 million is not overpaying for him. But it's like, I don't know. I don't want emotions to get in the way of any of their signings anymore, any of their transactions anymore. I think that's my biggest thing. So like, I know Sijan said earlier, let Lockett retire as Seahawk. If it doesn't make sense financially, I don't care. I don't care who it is. We moved on from Bobby. We moved on from Pete. I don't care who it is anymore. This is a new era, right? So, I mean,
I still think there's a lot of argument on the field for Tyler. So I
get that. I don't think there's just financially right now.
Yeah.
It just doesn't gel as well as it should.
They need to make that work.
The first transaction that Pete and John made was to release Walter Jones from his contract, and that was tough. They made so many transactions. They cut Lawrence Jackson, who was a Pete guy from USC, a first-round pick in 2008 or 7. They moved on from a lot of people right when Pete and John came in. I don't think it won't be like you said. It won't be a massive overhaul because the general manager is the same.
I don't think it should be either. Like, I was actually worried about that. I was worried that some guy would come in and want to cut all this talent, but there's such a young nucleus, and even for those who aren't super young, they're experienced enough, but like young enough where you can still do a lot with them, like a Uchenna Nwosu, like a DK Maker. Like, there's so much talent on the team, and most of them haven't met their prime. Like, there are very few guys past their prime on this roster. Quandre's one, Bobby's one, Tyler, I'm not sure.
No, he's past his prime. He's past his prime, but yeah, I think he's past his. He's not in the upward trajectory. He's peaked. Okay,
I'll say this: if Tyler was given the targets, not this year, I think next year. I think if he was given the same amount of targets he used to get, I think he could still perform the same. I think part of this DK's ascension, right? So he's not going to get the same amount of looks, but he's in the twilight at the very least. Like, the optimistic version is he's in the twilight of his prime. He's not quite done. I think he's still got some juice in the tank for sure, but he is on the latter years, and I don't know how long he plans on playing football. He's an X factor kind of guy. He could just up and retire. I can see a world where he's just like, retail's going, real estate agency's going great. Bye, guys.
Besides, and the only thing is like the only reason I've said this about luck is you have to pay homage to your past to get your new beginnings. Well, they didn't do it with Bobby. They fucking just
I
let
don't
him
think
go.
you have to. I disagree with that. I disagree with that. I don't think that you have to pay homage to your past to get new beginnings. I think the team already has new beginnings. They have their nucleus now of new beginnings. So, and you cut Bobby that same year you started, cut Russ. And so I think that year in itself proves that that's not true. It's a nice sentiment, but it's not true.
Yeah, and plus he's a Thunder fan.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's true.
That was actually a big deal in Seattle radio when everybody found out that he was a Thunder fan.
Well, didn't he grow up there or something like?
The team got there in 2008. It's not like he grew up a Thunder fan. How old was he in 2008?
Like, if your city has a team, isn't that where he grew up though?
Yeah, I believe he did.
I get it. It's hilarious to me. I'm a neutral observer, so that's funny to me. But I understand the anger. It just
people were pissed about that when they found out that he was wearing like a Thunder's hat or something. He was wearing a Thunder hat or something, and they're like, everybody found out about it. At the same time, they're like, "Oh my god, this guy needs to go." One way to piss people from Seattle off, tell them, "Oh, you're a Thunder fan."
You're a Thunder fan, yeah, that's fair. That makes sense. I completely understand. But I get it. In his case, I've always excused him because I've got the sense that like he just, I know you can't grow up a Thunder fan, but if your hometown has a team.
I lied. He was 16 when they got there, so that it makes a little bit more sense. He wasn't 20.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, that's still your hometown's thing. So I completely agree. We need the Sonics back. Seriously, hoping that that's in the mix. I completely agree with that. Because you guys definitely got screwed, no question. I think that's it. Let's see. Coaching candidates went over the main guys, the roster. I feel like, I know there were some questions about Vrabel, things like that. And we watched the recap because we did talk about that stuff earlier. For questions about the coaches. We talked about the QB situation. I saw a question about that too. We already kind of addressed that. So if you came in a little late, check that stuff out because we went through that. I think that's all I've got. How long do you think the search will last?
Pardon?
How long do you think the search will last?
It's so bizarre. This is the longest I can remember the Seahawks ever being without a head coach because Mora was there to replace Carroll. Or Mora was there to replace Mike.
Right.
So he got announced the day that Mike was gone. They already knew the whole season.
I'm glad that they didn't do that. I'm so glad that they're taking the time to truly go through. I would have been pissed off if that was the case. If they'd anointed someone else immediately.
Well, and they fired Jim Mora while they were interviewing Pete Carroll. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was kind of a messed up deal actually, because Jim Mora, he went to UW. But they made the right call. Jim Mora is a Seattle guy, like I said. He went to UW. But no, I can't remember the longest they've been without a head coach. This might be.
I get a sense it'll be at least a couple more weeks.
That's what I said. I said closer to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you may be right. Maybe a little before it. I hope it's a little bit before it. But
I do too, just because I kind of want to know, once we find out who the head coach is, then I feel like the roster moves will be a lot more intriguing to break down.
Yep.
Because
before that, I want to know who the offensive and deep. I want to know who the opposite guy they're going to hire. So if it's a defensive guy, I want to know who the offensive head coordinator is going to be. If it's an offensive head coach, then I want to know who the defensive guy is going to be because both are critical.
Yeah,
and I will say, I'm not one of the people that feel like there's a big sentiment going around that we need a defensive head coach because the defense is the problem side of the ball. I think Rob Stanton made this point. I think it's a great point, and it was that most of the top 5 offenses also have top 10 defenses. because it's easier to keep a good defensive coordinator than it is a good offensive coordinator. So I don't necessarily think that you have to have a defensive guy to fix the defense. Quite frankly, because I just feel like the defense never had a true identity to begin with. And literally anybody who has an identity to begin with can come in and make a difference. Also, it's almost like last year too, where you were like they were so bad statistically that it's hard to get worse.
Can't get worse. They
that,
didn't.
like,
I think they finished 30th in rushing this year.
yes,
they were 31st. We're gonna and guess what? In 29 years, we're gonna be first in rushing if we continue on this trend.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So I think that I don't think that it has to be a defensive coordinator. I think that's a misnomer. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and ultimately, I think they proved that last offseason just by how they handled the whole. Everybody was like, "You need defensive linemen in the trenches," and ultimately, I think the defensive line ended up being one of the stronger points on the season. When it was all said and done, it wasn't the D line's fault that the defense was bad. It was the secondary.
It was honestly
secondary
linebackers and defensive backs that were the biggest missed tacklers on the team. Yeah. I mean, it was open field tackling. It wasn't like, in the whole, this guy's getting wrapped up and just breaks out of it. No, it's open field tackling was the issue. Let me get that straight.
Exactly.
I don't. So
I think there's more than one way to skin a cat, and they proved that with how they attacked. I mean, ultimately the run defense still ended up being bad, but that was more because I really blamed it on linebackers. But whatever. Like,
no, I do too. Yeah. I do too. And I get a lot of hate from this, but Bobby's not what he was. He was good at tackling, but a lot of those run fits were you'd watch the tape over, and maybe that's a scheme. Maybe he's supposed to sell out on some of those counter plays, but he sold hard on some of those counter runs, especially against the Steelers.
Yeah. Where are you on edge? Do you want another edge guy?
Well, we're getting one back. I think that'll be a big thing.
Yeah, getting North back is huge. That's why I'm not draft-wise. Edge isn't high priority for me. I don't want so many guys that. Honestly, I'd rather get a vetted edge than another young guy.
I don't know. I feel like Derek Hall might come into it this year.
That's what I mean. Like, I'd rather. I don't want to draft another young guy to compete with Derek Hall, to compete with Darrell Taylor, to compete with. I already got guys. They got bodies. I don't know if they really need. Get some experience in there, and I think you'll be fine. A guy who you don't mind if the young guy beats him, then it's cool. Not quite Bruce Irvin, but some guy that can be depth to you. If the young guys succeed.
Not quite like Bruce Irvin, not quite like Frank Clark.
Yes. Yeah, boy, Frank Clark.
That was so sad. I was such a Clark fan before he left too, and he got us a nice first round pick. But geez, he came back this year, and I'm like, why is he on the field?
He just needs to, and he's done. He's cooked. He's got nothing left.
This guy says more Mike Morris. Yeah, wasn't he hurt?
Yep, super early in the year.
Yep,
super early in the year, and he didn't really get a ton of training camp in, from what I remember correctly. He was injured for that, so that's what I mean. I'm not sure we need to draft. I'm fine drafting an interior D lineman because we need more of that, but especially at a cheaper price. But in terms of your edge guys, maybe get somebody on the back end for minimal type deal. If young guys succeed, then he can just be depth. But if the young guys fail, then he can step in and play for you.
Well, and it all depends on who we bring in too, because where did they come from? Who did they work with before? Who are some guys that they're familiar with? And then I feel like they can kind of get linked in to that. This guy's doing live play-by-play games of the All Around Sports Network is.
So
cool. Go tune into him.
Yeah. I disagree that
Wilson's back.
Wilson will be back next week. Can you get that comment on the DE? And I don't think that cornerback is an issue at all. I think that cornerback tackling was an issue, but I put that on the coaching's head. Honestly, I also put you got man corners and put them in zone 90% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
That baffles me. And so I do not blame those guys for like, I think you get better tackling. Okay, maybe not Tariq, but I think you get better tackling overall from your DBs if they were in man because they were better at man coverage. Tariq,
Well,
I'm not sure that that's the case.
Tariq's rookie year, he was never the best tackler, but boy, he towards the end of his rookie season, you're starting to go. Actually, towards the middle, you're going, man, this guy can tackle too. And then last year, it's like,
Go off a cliff, and we've seen him do it. So again, I put that more on coaching, whether it's motivating the guys or falling back on technique, not being held, not holding them accountable, whatever it is.
and that's one thing I was worried about. It's like work on the basics a little bit more. Stop worrying about running all these 3-4 schemes, multiple schemes.
Really 4-3s. That still drives me nuts. That they got all that 3-4 personnel, got rid of all the 4-3 personnel, and then ran 4-3. It drives me. That drives me so insane. I think that was the number one thing that made me okay to let go of Pete. When I'm like, what in the heck are we doing? Obviously, our front office and our coaching staff obviously are not on the same pages because you're just taking guys and throwing them in positions that you want them to be without consideration for their skill sets.
But before I get out of here, I did want to say I'm kind of making like a trippy video for Pete Carroll. I'm kind of trying to make like a documentary. So I went back. I watched his first press conference for the Seahawks being introduced. Do you know what his first words were?
No.
I'm fired up to be here. And then it was so funny. I watched this whole. I was just trying to clip some stuff, and I ended up watching the first press conference. He goes, the basis is running the football. We need to have a good run. We need to have a good run game. And I'm like, Jesus, dude, it has never changed.
Nope. Same guy. He actually didn't run the ball so much there at the end.
No.
He didn't.
Whatever.
He grew a little.
Well, what do you have going on this weekend? You have anything going on in your channel? Or?
No, Seahawks related. We are basically just doing pretty much breaking news stuff as stuff comes out. For those guys who do not know, I'm like 8 months pregnant now. So I am.
Congrats.
Thank you. I am 8 months pregnant now. So we are winding things down, not just because it makes sense to football wise, but also literally because I cannot keep doing podcasts. I'm about to have a kid soon. Yeah. So anyway, I'll still do breaking news stuff. I don't even think I'll be able to get in my draft stuff the way I did last year. I think I went super heavy on draft stuff last year. Thanks, guys. But anyway, I'll sort of be living new life. It's my first child.
Good.
So
awesome.
Yeah. That's what we'll be doing on our Sports Ethos. But I will be tweeting out quite frequently just because I know I won't be able to do as much podcast content. So if you follow me on at Ethos Seahawks, still can get my thoughts and opinions as things go down. And myself and my co-host Tino will try to hold it down as best we can over the offseason.
All right. Well, make sure to congratulate everybody, and you all have a great night. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Joe.
Bye.